So what I want to tell you is a little bit about the history of this Christmas. And I want to tell you that a long time ago, it was not the Christmas that you know today. Christmas was when you would have these roving bands of beggars in the street. And they would pound on the door of middle-class houses, and they would pound on the fancy doors of the proper rich people's houses. And they would say, "Give us some candy, give us liquor, wassail, wassail." You know, wassail is alcohol. And so they would say, "Give us," and sometimes they would even say, "Give us money." And the rich people would open the doors and pour alcohol in everybody's wassail cup, and they would give money, and they didn't feel like they'd been mugged. They just gave it because it was Christmas time. And I wonder, where did they get the nerve to do that? Where do you get the nerve to just bang on people's doors and ask for stuff? Well, we would do that at Halloween. But these were adults, and they weren't dressed up, and they were drunk already, and they decided to bang on people's doors and ask for more alcohol. And they had wassailing songs. You all know, "Here we go, a wassailing among the leaves so green." It's an ancient tradition to go wassailing. Now we go caroling, but we don't get alcohol. So it's kind of prettied up a little bit. The reason that they had the nerve to do this goes all the way back to the original celebration that was in mid-December in Rome. In Rome, there was a celebration around December 17th, 19th, 20th that was called Saturnalia. And the whole purpose for Saturnalia was to honor the god of seed, the god of harvest. Wintertime was a time in agricultural societies when there wasn't that much for the men to do. And there had just been a harvest, and so there was plenty of food and plenty of beer and cider. And so it was a kind of a time of excess in Rome. And during Saturnalia, you were celebrating the return of Sol Invictus, the unconquerable sun. And so you celebrate the return of the sun by staying drunk for a week and by everything in the social order being turned on its head. The masters who had enslaved folks working for them, they would give a feast for their slaves. And in some families, the masters and the slaves would sit together at the feast during Saturnalia. And in some families, the masters would serve the slaves, table service, during Saturnalia, because it was opposite day. Everything was happening the way it never did during the regular, ordinary time of the social order. People would throw off their sober togas, and they would wear dress clothes, dressy, shiny, sparkly stuff during the day on the street, which was really frowned upon in Rome. And the gambling, which was also frowned upon in Rome, was allowed during Saturnalia. People wrote about it and said, "These are the happiest of days." Because all the social norms got loosened up, kind of like ours do at Mardi Gras or New Year's Eve. So, or Eeyore's birthday. So really, it was already an enormous, beloved celebration in Rome. Now comes Emperor Constantine, who wants to turn the whole Roman Empire Christian, because his mother was a Christian. And he felt like the cross was helping him win battles. So he wanted to turn the whole Roman Empire Christian. Now, what would you do? You have bishops. You call your bishops together. You go, "How are we going to turn this whole empire Christian?" The people are already celebrating and reveling and loving this week of Saturnalia. How about, the bishop said, how about we just rebrand it as Christian, and we call it a celebration of Jesus' birthday, And even though the words are not similar in Latin, they are in English. So you go, instead of the unconquerable Son, let's celebrate the unconquerable Son of God. And so the drunk people in the street really didn't care what they were celebrating, and it turned into a big revel in honor of the birthday of Jesus. And this spread throughout the whole Roman Empire. People were reveling at this time of year. Now, they knew Jesus wasn't born in December. Everybody knows Jesus wasn't born December 25th. It's not even going to shock the most fundamentalist of your friends. They know that already. Because if you read the Bible, you'll find the shepherds were out watching the flocks by night in the fields. And if you study, you know that in Bethlehem, it's cold in December. Everybody thinks of the Middle East as just a hot, hot place. But Israel is not. Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, it gets cold there. It snows on the mountains. You can go skiing in Israel. And so if you are out in the field with your flocks by night, it's probably March or September. You're going to be inside sheltering if it's December. So Jesus probably born in September sometime. They worked it out with a bunch of other stuff I will not put in this sermon because it's already too long. And they figured that he was born September, but if you want a new religion to catch on, you don't try to start complete new traditions and new celebrations and take the old ones away. If people are already celebrating at a time, or they already have a sacred site in a certain place, you're just going to rebrand it as yours. And as generations pass, the people accept it. And the pagan traditions live on, but they're just reframed as your new religion's traditions. So the topsy-turviness of this enabled roving bands of beggars, and sometimes young adults from high-born families too, to roam the streets and bang on people's doors and ask for alcohol. It's the topsy-turviness. And in the United States, the Puritans, who did not really approve of drunkenness or reveling, unless you were reveling quietly within in a reverent way. Reverend reveling. And they were New Englanders too, and you know, because New England. They wanted to be sober and not vulgar about it. So the Puritans outlawed the celebration of Christmas. They just flat outlawed it in the 1600s and 1700s. Later, the laws went away, but it was still, even though it was legal technically, it was culturally taboo. It was frowned upon. Nice people didn't do it. You did not go reveling. And when merrymakers tried to be merry, who were not Puritans, non-Puritans who were in the community tried some merrymaking, it got shut down pretty fast. Not because it was illegal. There were no fines anymore like there had been earlier, but there was cultural shunning involved, and nobody would let their kids play with your kids anymore, etc. So it wasn't until the federal government named Christmas as a national holiday in 1870 that it became sort of okay in New England to do Christmas reveling. There are many people still who want a very low-key Christmas. Just, it's vulgar to do anything else in the Northeast. But Puritanism still reigns in America. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. Many businesses didn't even close for Christmas Day until 1870. So what made it happen that the Federals decided that it was going to be a good national holiday? Well, it was Queen Victoria and Prince Albert who made Christmas what it is today. The Victorian era is when Christmas stopped being the drunk in the streets kind of Mardi Gras Halloween combo, and it became a dignified in-the-house celebration of light return and the baby's birth. Prince Albert was from Germany. He and his family celebrated by bringing an evergreen tree inside in order to celebrate the season. You decorate the evergreen tree. Well, nobody in England had done that because it was kind of a Norse tradition. It was a Nordic Viking kind of tradition. And the Germans were closer to that than the British, even though the Vikings had conquered Britain. Prince Albert brought the tree inside, and there was a photograph published in the London, the Illustrated London News in 1848. There was a picture of them sitting with their children by the decorated Christmas tree. The Illustrated London News published that picture, and the next year, every single household in Britain had a decorated Christmas tree because the cool kids were doing it. One businessman, a few years later, commissioned an artist to draw a Christmas card that he could sell, and it sold for $1, which was way out of the reach of most people. They couldn't afford $1 for a Christmas card, and so the idea caught on, though, and everybody started asking their children to make Christmas cards that they could then trade with their friends and give out. Even Queen Victoria had her children make their own Christmas cards, so that became another wonderful, warm Christmas tradition. There always had been presents exchanged at Christmas, little nuts and sweets and that kind of thing, because the wise men brought presents to the baby Jesus. And so presents were always part of it. But presents became a little bit more important in this time when you were inside with your families and people weren't really supposed to go raucously begging door to door anymore. You gave presents to your children. Normally, your children were there to do what you said. But the topsy-turviness continued in a way in that the children were allowed to kind of run the house on Christmas Day. I don't know if you all grew up like this, that you were allowed to wake up whenever you woke up and wake up your parents and go down and demand presents and unwrap things. And it was the same thing as the upending of the social order, which actually, if it's only for a day or two, it actually reinforces the social order, yes? Because you're upending it, everybody knows what it is, and then you go back to it after that. So in Rome, there was this sort of permission during Saturnalia for the slaves to speak freely to their masters, but the slaves, being not stupid, knew that Saturnalia was going to be over in like 2 days, and so I'm sure their speaking freely was somewhat less free than it otherwise might have been. Some people did want to remember the poor on Christmas, and so there was a lot of charity at Christmas time. Instead of the poor coming to your house, though, you went to where the poor lived and brought turkeys and groceries and that kind of thing to kind of feel good and do some good and keep them where they lived. Giving to the poor was encouraged by St. Nicholas, who was a Greek Orthodox saint, whose saint's day was on December 6th. And so he became connected with the Christmas time. St. Nicholas was a kind and generous saint. And after he died, there were so many miracles attributed to him that he was called Nicholas the Wonder Worker. And so he was from a place that is now Turkey. But after he died, half his bones were stolen and taken to a town in Italy called Bari. And in Bari, he's called Nicholas of Bari, of course. The Dutch called him Sinterklaas and portrayed him as an elderly, stately bishop, which St. Nicholas was, a bishop who had white hair and a long, full beard, and he wears a long red cape or chasuble over a white bishop's alb. These are all church names for the kind of dressy things that church officials wear. And he has a red mitre, his hat, and a ruby ring, and holds a gold-colored crozier, which is a long shepherd's staff with a fancy top. And Sinterklaas evolved from St. Nicholas, It's just if you say St. Nicholas really fast, you can kind of get Santa Claus. It's all the same name. And Sinterklaas, interestingly enough to me, rides a white horse through the sky. This is another Norse tradition because Odin used to ride a white horse through the sky. And Sinterklaas has a book that tells who's been naughty and who's been nice. So he can tell to reward the good little children and punish the bad little children. The Viking traditions are this white horse, this bearded godlike guy who, after the Viking tradition caught hold in Ireland and Scotland and England, he became Father Christmas, but he looked like Odin. And the evergreen trees, the mistletoe, the holly and the ivy, the wreaths representing the sun and the circle of the year, the evergreens were adored because they made it through the winter, and we wanted to make it through the winter. So we thought maybe the evergreens know something that we need to know, and we brought them into our houses. So there's this kind of a jambalaya of Celtic, Christian, Middle Eastern, Viking, Druid traditions that make up Christmas the way that we celebrate it now. So sometimes Santa Claus or St. Nicholas was portrayed as a thin, kind of sour-faced man, the way you would think of a saint. I don't know why we think of saints as sour-faced, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. Or he was a tiny little elf, a wizened little elf. Or he was a dignified, bishop-y looking guy with bishop-looking clothes. Or he was a kind of a woodsy green man look. This comes from the Druid tradition again, the green man with his, he lives in the forest and his hair is a little bit wild and he's dressed in raggedy brown clothes because he's an earth man. So Santa was dressed in all kinds of different things: green, blue, red, brown. He wasn't defrocked and unbishoped, unsainted, until this poem that Ian read. This was the night before Christmas, and there's nothing bishopy about this guy, about this Santa Claus. And so this one poem kind of made Santa Claus more approachable to Americans and made him a jolly person. And it says in the poem that he was covered in fur, so he's not in red yet, he's sooty furs. And he has a little belly, so he's plump, and he's got rosy cheeks and eyes that sparkle and a little nose. So this poem is a poem that really did shape our sense of Santa Claus. So he's not a bishop anymore, not a saintly churchman, and he's become a lot more friendly. Why is he pictured now in red with a white beard? Always in red, Santa is. Well, it's because of Coca-Cola. In the 1930s, there was an ad campaign where the Coke company commissioned an artist to draw not a guy dressed as Santa, but the real Santa. And the artist used a retired Coca-Cola salesman who lived down the street from him and just painted him with his white beard and his red cheeks and put him in a red suit because red was the color of the Coca-Cola logo. So he's in a red suit and he's opening Coke for the children. You still see this commercial. Even now, it's been lasting a good long time. Not the same commercial as in the 30s, but he's still in red, and we all kind of accept that Santa Claus is in red and white, and seeing him with a Coke in his hand just seems very natural. Well, there's a reason for that. So the merriment and the presents and the drinking and the being jolly and the caring for the poor at Christmas time, the topsy-turviness of the poor being right in your face at Christmas time, those things are in tension at Christmas. And there are people who make it either or, which I think is a very Puritan thing to do, and it bothers me. And I think that especially in Texas, where the Puritan influence is way less than it is in most other places in the country, we should be able to break free of this tension. And yet, there is a billboard. I love the food bank, but their billboard on Burnett Road and 49th says, "'Tis the season to be jolly. Jolly is crossed out, and feed the hungry is put underneath there." Crossed out jolly? What else could they have done? They could have put an and or a plus sign. "'Tis the season to be jolly and feed the hungry." Can we get this Puritanism out? You can be a happy, merry person and do good in the world, right? There's a Facebook thing that's going around that a lot of lovely people are posting. It's from some Sweet Mother website. And it has her Christmas list. And she has things like wrap the presents and all the things you'd have on your Christmas list. But presents is crossed out. And it says, "Wrap your arms around those you love." Where's the plus sign? You can wrap presents and wrap your arms around the people you love. I noticed this stuff. This is crazy stuff in our culture. If I were tasked with eliminating hunger in the world, which I wish somebody would pay me to do, and then I'm sure I could figure it out. We'd all figure it out together. If I had that job to do, I would not want a bunch of somber, self-righteous do-gooders with me. I would want a bunch of merry-hearted, jolly people to help me figure this out. People who knew that you can be jolly and feed the hungry. And that at Christmas time, we don't have to go, "Well, we shouldn't let ourselves be too happy because there's suffering in the world." Of course there's suffering. This world is horrible right now. We have one bad news story after the other. We have one thing to be afraid of after the other. How is it going to help anybody in Syria if I'm sad on Christmas time? What, I'm going to email them and say, "I'm sad for you on Christmas. I'm not enjoying anything in my life now because you're in the middle of a war." They'd be like, "Thank you." I think the way that we do it is good. We don't do good once a year to help the unfortunate. We do good because we partner with those of us who don't have enough, and we do good on a regular basis all year long, and we kind of have fun doing it. I like that way of doing it. So I think it's important to find that still place and to realize that there is a lot of suffering in the world, and that we need to have compassionate hearts toward that suffering, and that we need to do whatever we can to alleviate that suffering. And part of our job, if we are in the United States having a pretty good life, part of our job is to add to the joy of the planet. Because some kind of somber sorrow on my part because something is going wrong in someone else's life is kind of weirdly entitled, in that I am going to suffer. I know you're having your suffering, and I know you're suffering over your suffering, but it would really help you if I suffered too, because I'm important that way. I still don't understand this, but I'm going to keep preaching about it till I figure it out. I think it's our job to add to the joy in the world, as well as being aware of the suffering and alleviating as much as we can. So let's be jolly and feed the hungry and have a good time smelling this spicy mixture of Druids and Romans and Vikings and Christians that is our Christmas time. And may you have a merry one.